Good morning and welcome to this 16th edition of Research for Business. It's the Institute for Research of the Emilia-Romagna region, which organizes with OnAir. We launch now this first meeting on research. And let me introduce the speakers that shall be with us here. Giovanni Anceschi, chairman of OnAir, the company consortium of the Emilia-Romagna region for research and knowledge, and Mr. Stefano Paleari, um, advisor, expert for the Ministry of for the PNRR, Mr. Stefano Bonaccini, who will be joining us. There are still physical spaces to overcome, so he has not yet joined us. And let me welcome all our viewers, and let me call the chairman of Art Air, Mr. Anceschi, to tell us what has happened after the COVID pandemic. The first meeting we had was in presence when we met at the exhibition compound. And by the way, I apologize for the background noise while I'm speaking. So you are going to help us understand how the digital unfolding is changing approaches of companies and of research centers, which are the two interlocutors that are present at the moment. Thank you very much, Ilaria, and good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very happy to welcome and open this edition after the pandemic that we all know of. And let's hope that shortly we shall be able to meet again in hybrid forms. Meeting in presence face to face is important. This edition starts with some novelties, and today and tomorrow we shall be presenting some of these, namely the National Plan for Recovery and Resilience, which involves innovation ecosystem at the regional level, the new European plans, which we shall be presenting between today and tomorrow in the various sessions. Now, the metaphor that best represents this change that we are experiencing is the Bologna Techno Pole. These have been difficult years in which we have worked. Unfortunately, the COVID pandemic came along, and despite the challenges, the Technopole is now ready. It will host shortly the first supercomputers and therefore the first machines that will place Bologna at the engine, if you like, of a national system on data to provide services to our companies. Technopolo is also a metaphor for these years of change, and the region has really been engaged, and Art as well has played an important role in this. And also the image, this is an image also that launches this meeting. We have put at the fore skills and competence to start these 2 days of working sessions. Emilia-Romagna as a region in Italy is well placed in research and innovation. We are the first region in Italy for the number of universities, graduates, and researchers. These are important figures that tell us that with the topics that we are discussing right now, these topics are daily issues for us. And this region accounts for several companies that bring innovation and well-being to our society. At the center today, we have knowledge as a challenge to restart after the pandemic. And we are doing this, taking an opportunity. The National Resilience and Recovery Plan will be investing 15 billion on basic and applied research and knowledge research. And we're happy to start from here to better understand how this plan will have an impact on our region. So it is at the fore, as I said, the National Recovery and Resilience Plan, because it will accompany the resource to business activities. What has changed? We're all talking on a digital platform. This is one thing that has changed, and therefore being in presence is no longer an engine for innovation. But if we consider all the international relations and all the players in innovation, how they work every day, the opportunity to have a digital opportunity such as this is important because it means that our system can connect with other international systems at the European and global level. And all this is central for us in terms of the development for companies and the system of research and development. These 2 days will be rich in themes. Let me mention just a few. We should be talking about big data, ecological transition, new space economy, a new trend where Emilia-Romagna is at the fore. Rise of Europe program will be presented and what this program brings to companies and to research and innovation. So we have a panoply of contents and themes which we are bringing to the center of our discussions. I'm happy that I'm here to open these sessions and tell you what will be unfolding in the following steps. I have a question. Uh, there are advantages in digitalization. The fact that we're now more dematerialized and we can communicate virtually regardless of where we are in the world. This is a formula, I believe, that will be preserved even in hybrid forms of meeting in future editions. Is that correct? Yes, we all want to meet face to face again, but we can, of course, go on using the digital platforms to communicate. We've seen the good results we've achieved in the figures we had last year in terms of the growth of international relations. Our events connecting the various clusters have had a boom of connections and link ups with major international protagonists in the field. And companies, of course, thanks to this event, can connect with the poles of excellence, not only in their territory, but international and European centers of excellence. So we will continue on the digital formats. We're going to mention the attractiveness of this region. Waiting for the chairman of the region, Mr. Bonaccini, let me ask Mr. Paleari, Stefano Paleari, councillor, expert for the ministry, who has been dealing with several of the topics we're discussing here. We're talking about an Emilia-Romagna region, which ranks first in Italy. But then when we compare with Europe, the ranking is not as high. So how are we moving? There are huge hopes right now and expectations. with regard to the resources and the funds coming from Europe. What are the main gaps and what measures have you thought of to position us at least in equal terms with other manufacturing poles and centers? Thank you. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I am pleased to bring the uh, regards and wishes from the Minister to this event and meetings. And it's also a pleasure to attend a meeting organized by a region which has been active, extremely active on these themes for some time. And it is not by chance that today this region begins to capitalize on policies that usually require a great deal of time for implementation. Constance and determination usually, and in this case, have determined results. We come from a period of 10 years which have been harsh for the system of research and academia, especially in Italy, and this before the pandemic, the COVID pandemic crisis. But these past 10 years, from the point of view of research and university, have not been lost years. They have been lost in terms of investments. And what you mentioned with regard to the PNRR and what Mr. Anceschi referred to are an answer to the loss that we have seen in investments for research over the past 10 years. But these 10 years have not gone completely lost because the world of research and university has undergone reforms and now is at levels which are comparable with the international standards. Let me quote one simple example for this. In 2010, more than 90% of resources received by universities was based on the historical quotas. They received resources based on what they had received in the previous periods. There were no standard costs evaluated, and competitive funding accounted for a meager 10%. After 10 years now, the historical share or quota has dwindled. There are standard costs which now allocate 30% of the funds given to universities, and the premium bonus quota is accounted for an extra 30%. What do we mean by standard costs? Well, research, the universities are the first in public administration entities to adopt this measurement. In other words, it means allocating resources based on the number of students and the uh, services provided. And when it comes to research and development, there are selection processes and assessments which are conducted by independent advisors and advisors. So 10 years of difficulties when it comes to resources, dwindling in the number of researchers. We were 59,000 in 2010 within the university. We're now below 22,000 in 2020, 52,000, and now we are 53,000. So we're still below by 10% of the 2010 levels. So this is the starting point, and I wanted to highlight this because often we don't take into account the longer term trends. Now, being aware of all this has now brought us to drafting the fourth mission of the recovery plan for research and innovation with an aim to reverse these trends. And the goal is to change the approach, but well aware that we have to be aware of the weaker points we stem from. Now, there is a first component in the mission which is the enhancing of the services for instruction, education, and the second component, which is of more concern for our viewers and listeners today, devoted to research as such. From research to business is the theme today, in fact. And what does this theme and what does this component devoted to research and to transition that leads from research to generating business entail? What does it entail and what does it contain? It contains two types of measures. The former measures of relating to a bottom-up approach. Those who want to compete on certain research topics will be able to do so, unlike the past, with continuity. So there will be a continuity of funding these initiatives until 2026, and with amounts which are significant. Therefore, having access to these funds increases substantially in terms of probabilities. Of course, we're talking about competitive contexts that will require assessments, but these are initiatives which favor basic research and the transfer of technology.
Beside this, there is another bottom-up initiative which has to do with research centers and so with the mission to attract new researchers. Of course, as we are all aware, Italy is witnessing quite a huge loss of brains. And of course, we don't want the country to remain closed in itself. Instead, we want to create conditions to have Italian researchers to come back to their country. So, in the recovery plan, there is quite an important initiative which has the specific objective of funding research centers for the winners of the European research project of the QE and C also grants. These are quite technical terms, so do not worry, but these are specific labels, technical labels of grants recognized and knowledge to young researchers. So for the first time, the ministry has a program of 600 million, which is specifically dedicated to these grants. Then a whole series, a whole set of initiatives which are bottom-up projects still, but they require still a top-down approach. And these initiatives are basically research partnership throughout the whole supply chain, let's say, where we have 1.6 million allocated, and then national research centers such as the Technopole, so the technological hub of Bologna, where 1.6 million euros will be invested, and it will be divided into five national centers, and then 1.3 million for the national centers and 1.6 for the infrastructure of research and innovation. So what I'm saying basically is that these investments would have been unthinkable just last year or 1 year and a half ago, and they will enable to fill important gaps such as grants for researchers, young researchers, but also entrepreneurial gaps among different parts of the country, and gender gaps, because as we are all aware, Italy is quite lagging behind from the perspective of gender gap and gender equality. I know that Emilia-Romagna is particularly active at this regards and is communicating this throughout this initiative and many others. And I believe it's quite the right thing to do, and all the other Italian regions should follow the lead. Earlier, Ilaria Vesentini said that we are still experiencing a gap compared to other European countries, which is absolutely true. But through initiatives such as the one of the Technopole, a technological hub in Bologna, or the one of Technoforming Computer in Bologna, and many other initiatives involving public and private actors and research centers and universities. So, through all these initiatives, I believe that Italy can become a reference point in Europe, thus laying the basis and creating the conditions for research investments to be understood for what it is, with a high return on investment, with a high social impact, and with a return on investment which will benefit the whole community, which is actually funding the education of our researchers. And it's quite a pity that then all these resources flee away. So I believe that steps taken into this direction, thanks to the recovery plan, provides a unique occasion. However, I believe awareness we should be aware of a few things. First of all, recovery is temporary, covering years from 2021 to 2026. And within this deadline, it needs to meet deadlines, as the European Union will be very tough on this. So this implies also implementing a reform to support mobility, the mobility of researchers between different countries and different institutions. So, first of all, meeting the deadlines, and least but not last, provided the conditions for these initiatives to go on even after 2026. These are all national initiatives with a European perspective. And the technological hub of Bologna, the Technopole, is affirming itself as a real hub between the bespoke system as an IT center, and will become a really point of reference for IT, but also biopharma, sustainable mobility, agri-tech. These are all topics and themes which can be integrated in it. And so I do believe that the efforts undertaken by the region, Emilia-Romagna, can be combined with a national effort. Indeed, their effort is very important one, and I'd like to congratulate on the President Bonaccini for that. And so I hope that their effort will inspire other regions to follow their lead. I have heard throughout the last few months Councillor Collar speaking about initiatives to be taken in Bologna and to make Bologna an international point of reference. Well, if you want to make Bologna a point of reference at international level, this is the right spirit to follow. So, new pathways of economic development which should be sustainable and to support a real growth, well, they require innovation and the capacity to attract young people with a solid cultural and scientific education. And if this can be achieved, well, I believe we will help be able to create a solid political heritage. So this is our political objective. And I am glad that today also the initiative on the meteorological center is accomplished, is an initiative which has been considerably supported by the region Emilia-Romagna, has invested a lot, plus the 40 million of the ministry, and I hope they will reach the success. I hope this initiative of the meteorological center will be successful, and President Bonaccini is very proud of this initiative, and I share this with you because I took part in this. It is the result of a whole system, of the effort of a whole system. So my message is that all the initiatives in the recovery plan are not individual initiatives. They are the initiatives triggered and implemented by a whole systems. We have, for example, taken inspiration by France and Germany, and these are the result of the effort of a whole system. They can aggregate and combine different regions, different communities, but they have the single objective of supporting Italy. Thank you for your attention. Thank you, Professor, and I'd like to welcome the President of the region Emilia-Romagna, Stefano Bonaccini. And the focus is really placed on innovation, and I guess the President has a lot to say about that because region is really his region is really an example of how a system and synergy can be created in a system. So, speaking about attractiveness and becoming a hub, and I believe that really Emilia-Romagna is an example. So, I give you the floor. Please, can you tell us something about the attractiveness? Because you're really being an example for the rest of Italy. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for inviting me. So, you have just said it, and I can just stress it even more. I've never used the word model. I've never used this word. I don't like it. But what is happening, what we are witnessing, is something that is identifying us, our region, as a very attractive region, a very attractive area, and an interesting one, because we are the first one for numbers of researchers, the first one for our attractiveness of our university system, for the number of graduated within a certain age range. We are maybe the first region or among the first for the number of patents as against the population. We invest more than 2% in research, which equals to the European average, and of course above the Italian average, which reaches more or less just 1%. So investments have been so numerous throughout these years that we can just grasp fruits now. The fact that Prime Minister Draghi decided to start his visits from the Technopole of Bologna is quite a targeted choice, was quite a targeted choice. Our mission, our objective is contributing to the European and Italian efforts, providing a data valley which will be integrated and will compete with the one of China and the United States. To have the meteorological center here with more than 1,000 researchers throughout Europe and the national agency which will be moved from Rome to Bologna, and having here the headquarters of the National Institution for Physics and INEA and many other institutions for scientific research. So, having all this at our disposal, and of course, the supercomputer enabling to have the big data foundation available to the whole of Italy and to the whole of Europe. Well, having all this will enable us to place ourselves above 80% of the European average for competition. So we will be identified as a highly innovated area with an area of as an area of a high innovation, which can really provide an engine to our country. Of course, this is the result of the many investments we have made, and this is also the result of the many relationships that has enabled us to share with the other actors, with other actors, objectives. And among these objectives, we have identified the priorities. So we have decided, of course, to favor investments in research and investments, and with a focus on competitiveness, because in order to be competitive with Europe and the other nations of the world, we need to be competitive. Enterprises know how to be competitive. Firms know how to be competitive. So we have manufacturing districts which are leading first in the world. But speaking about globalization, we witness on the one hand the internationalization of companies, on the other hand the need for financial tools and technological tools, of course, and this is not by chance that we mentioned the Technopole of Bologna. So all these, I believe, are crucial elements in order, in my opinion, to create a territory which will be able to contribute concretely in terms of attractiveness.
This was not the major factor after the Second World War. It has increasingly become attractive. We have examples and references to support this. Why? Because there is a set of opportunities here in our region, which I believe show um, a set of values and resources which will uh, cooperate with the world of employment, businesses, and research. Last but not least, we are working on a project on how to attract and keep the best talents after high school graduation and after university graduation, because there's much to do and invest in this area. We need more and more training, vocational training, and the fact that in the resilience and recovery plan, the government has said that the technical high school institutes have these schools of Emilia-Romagna as a benchmark is something that we are proud of. And in other words, we have had a positive example with alternating work with study in high school here. That plan has worked well here. This is what we're working on, and we bring together industry, human capital, and society at large. And when it comes to competitiveness and entrepreneurship, we can provide a positive example for the longer term in terms of growth, because this is something on which we have invested and it is something new. This covenant for employment and the climate shows that decision making can be streamlined and fast, as we have demonstrated. We have before us a formidable opportunity, more than 200 billion euros to be spent over the next years, which incidentally sum up with the another plan for the period 21-26, more 3 billion for the Emilia-Romagna alone, because these are funds coming from Europe. And since we are a region that spends all the funds that are earmarked and allocated, we would rather have more. And the climate covenant 30 billion of further public funds and private funds. With all these resources, we shall be put to the test, and the judgment on these lawmakers will be on their ability to spend these funds. And this is a huge challenge and opportunity. Thank you, Mr. President, but please stay with us. Let me now call Mr. Anceschi, who is now at the helm of a company that represents um, knowledge, research. Uh, they deal with applied maths and so on. Now, OnAir is now has a government participation because there is the regional authorities that are part of your company too. What is your comment on what Mr. Bonaccini was saying? The changes over these years with the pandemic in this to what has it brought in terms of perceptions on the part of those conducting research, and what is the outlook for this region as a hub open to the world? This region has also another record, that of internationalization, which is above average for Italian regions. Well, the world has changed because of the COVID crisis. Of course, from the point of view of businesses, this is highly felt, but also from the public administration standpoint. The perception of the digital world has changed. When 2 years ago I became chairman of Art, digital was thought as a trend. Today, it is in our homes, children use it. We're now talking of innovation, and there is a basic training now that we have undergone when it comes to digital platforms. And this also brings to the fore the topics of equity and the issues related to the climate change and policies, and all the themes that are topical today are involved also with digitalization. And the pandemic has really had a major impact, but with points of strength that we see in our companies. The projections tell us that we're going to rebound from the crisis in the coming year. The focus has changed. Technopole is an important investment. This is what we're talking about here. And this investment will be able to generate a potential to attract talents. And I'd like to spend a few words on this. Why? Because it's important to, alongside the investments on infrastructure and research, Arte has worked hard on this, investments on Technopole. We have to accost this with what the region is doing to attract talents and cultivate the talents that we have in our universities. And there will be 3 important initiatives with regard to this. And so I'm mentioning this in answering your question on change, because this is the way we are interpreting the change, the transition, in terms of art and in terms of businesses. So 3 initiatives, which are B2B, a program, Case B2B. This is a program which brings together researchers and the businesses in our system, important programs with Italy, International Talents for Emilia-Romagna, to draw and attract international talents into our universities and research centers. We have drawn so far 700 profiles for software developers businesses have a huge demand for this. More than 700 talents that we have brought to the attention of the businesses that participated in the program, and the companies are now selecting them and recruiting them. Um, and this alongside our university research. And then the topic mentioned by Chairman Bonaccini in the Recovery and Resilience Plan, Emilia-Romagna is mentioned as a benchmark, as a school case. In research to business, we will have an addition, a session devoted to the efforts made by Automotive and the region in this endeavor. And this is part of our ecosystem of manufacturing and research. Profiles are emerging which have see a great demand on the part of businesses. So these abilities which our region is expressing in a difficult moment where several businesses are suffering, I think is a wonderful example of what can be done in a period of transition and crisis such as this. Schools, universities, and businesses in this region cooperate for the growth of all, the whole system, and society at large. And I like to highlight this as an excellence that we have expressed and that we would like to cultivate more. And when it comes to attractiveness of talents, of course, we have researchers, in this case, persons that are highly qualified, but these skills and competencies are specific and are put to the service of our businesses and system. Thank you, Mr. Anceschi. Let me call Professor Paleari. Strategic competencies, attracting investments, private investments, and attracting smart brains as well. Let me be provocative. There will be fewer and fewer young people. So might there not be a competition, a sort of struggle, considering that a region such as this sends messages that says um, that they prefer technical profiles to meet the business requirements. But at the same time, we need also students that attend universities more and more, and unfortunately, the figures are not that huge. So there could be a shortage of talents that could hinder growth. Am I being catastrophic, or does this resound with you? I wrote a book which is entitled The Non-Declared War, and I mentioned in the first chapter the fall in population growth. Luckily, we still have margins for growth. We are the European country with the lowest number of university graduates. President Bonaccini mentioned that Emilia-Romagna ranks first on this, and this means that it's closer to the European average, but the rest of the country still has to reach these levels of graduates. So this is the difficult demographic context. The topic of talents is a topic on which we should also approach it historically. The US built their competitive edge over the past 60, 70 years on cultivating talents. Today, we are performing this in democratic context and competition, but we have to be aware that the issue of talents is a war when you have to attract them. But I think that President Bonaccini was right when he said we have to be attractive because we have to provide the opportunities. That's what is important. Provide opportunities. In other words, uh, give the fishing rod and not the fish. This means creating something for the community at large. And the second thing, to answer your question and bridge this with Mr. Bonaccini's words, he said, social cohesion does not hinder development. I thought this was an excellent remark. It is a corollary. Exclusion does not help at all. So social cohesion is a rationale of inclusion, and this is very important. In the recovery plan, there is this matrix of pushing businesses and research centers to act as a system. It means bring together the strong points and not the weaknesses. And on the BTS, there was a wonderful discussion uh, between Minister Bianchi and Minister Messer. I have had both these persons as colleagues when they were deans of universities, and I too was a dean. Having mentioned the Emilia-Romagna model in those discussions, a model that does not exclude anyone. There's no separation between universities from schools or businesses from universities. The Emilia-Romagna approach has given voice to everyone, and therefore personnel with employment opportunities uh, as a key of the industrial process. And then the numbers, which are typical. Now, before we can achieve the French and German levels, we still have to run some more. I think that this recovery plan will enable the other regions also to reflect on how one can perform well with a number of players that will increase. There were two in the ETS issues. One was inclusivity, and the second was the question of numbers. We have a number of people involved in these programs, which is 40,000 people. In Germany, we know they are 800,000, 400,000 in France. So we have a 1 to 10 ratio here. So the theme is going in this direction to bring together and bridge a gap that separates us from the other main European countries.
I agree on the fact that the recovery plan we will also way to measure the performance of this management class. I believe that our generation is now called to take part and make its contribution at very difficult moments, and I believe we can do that. Thank you very much, Professor Paleari. I'd like to give the floor to President of the region, Bonaccini, and starting from the fact that your region has turned into a very attractive region, and despite adopting a completely different economic model, not based on manufacturing but on data valley, so a new model, a new system. So the question is, how can all these systems coexist? So how can the different districts coexist, so manufacturing, data valley, and so on and so forth? And how do you envisage your region in 20-year time? So do you believe that in 20-year time will still be manufacturing to bring the highest added value? Whether you think that brain will play the major part while arms and hands will be delocated somewhere else? Well, I believe that the forthcoming years will be crucial for our region. Um, Economic indicators, economic indexes show that next year we are likely to overcome 2010 GDP. So, kind of miracle, recovering more than 10 points of GDP in just 2 years. But especially 5% of inflation. So these are data and percentages, more or less. These are rough data. I believe that manufacturing will still be the heart of our production system in our region, at least for the next 10 years. But of course, it is of course, innovation, robotic, technological innovation will be required for them because 70% of our grandchildren will have jobs that are not existing right now, and all these new jobs will be the result of a technological implementation. And then let's think about this. Americans and Chinese come here to create the electrical supercar, and they come to our region because they find a concentration of human capital which cannot be found anywhere else. We are speaking about electrical vehicles which will change completely the production processes and the automotive sector industry. The whole automotive industry is working towards innovation. For example, I met Ferrari's management a few days ago, and they are thinking of creating a new building, a new academic center, a new educational center of also Stefan Winkelmann from Lamborghini, and he says that they are designing the electrical supercar. Pottery, then. Over the last few years, and a completely new kind of pottery has been created. And after the Technopole, Draghi visited our pottery district, which accounts for more than 80% of the national production. Or let's think of agri-food or the medical industry. So, in all sectors, what we are witnessing is that the manufacturing aspect cannot require technological development, and Data Valley is precisely about this. And on the other hand, I quite agree with what Paleari and Anceschi said, because on the one hand, attracting and keeping talents is fundamental. And when I say keeping, I mean I'm not worried for the fact that they are going to study abroad, that our students are going to study abroad. This is right, this is the right thing to do, going abroad, studying abroad, meeting new cultures. But our capacity is to be able to attract them back if they want to carry on their studies here or work here. And about this, we are developing a specific project which could be even the unique, the only one in Italy. The problem is finding the right resources, finding the right funds, and sharing and contributing to these funds together with the research and industry. And so developing a project based on a competitive educational system. But as I was saying, I agree what Baleari said about social cohesion. I believe, I feel that in order to make our society attractive, we need to ensure, on the one hand, cohesion, on the other hand, services. And I like to conclude with this. It's quite consistent with what I'm saying. For the first time, we're using one part of the European funds to build new kindergartens and nursery schools. It is true that Emilia-Romagna is the region with the highest number of places for nursery schools, quite above the European average. But still, quite an important number of families are not able to find a place for their children. So this is, as you can imagine, important to enable women to go back to work, which are part of our challenge because women were the most hit and struck during the pandemic and by the recession, together with the youth. But these are still the kindergarten, the nursery schools, are places, are educational places. And evidence has shown that Italian students are less educated compared to their European peers. And the most educated people, young people, are those who had the opportunity to attend kindergarten, nursery school, which is why we want to introduce English teaching starting from the nursery school. So we want to equip our children, our young boys and girls, with all the tools they need to be competitive. This is just an example, but it provides a real opportunity on how to build and provide services which enable, on the one hand, to provide a place where where children can grow while parents are growing, but at the same time growing, having and being equipped with the tools enabling them to be increasingly educated in the future. So knowledge started from the very first cries, let's say, of the children. So I'm sorry to interrupt you because it's 11. We need to close 11 sharp. So basically, you are working the whole life cycle of the person. Yes, indeed. This knowledge was my first objective of my agenda when I ran for elections. So, knowledge, knowledge for all. This is what we need to leverage to build a new social economic system which is a cohesive one and based on quality, because only through quality we can be successful. So thank you very much to all our speakers. So Giovanni Anceschi, Stefano Bonaccini. I'm sorry to interrupt you. And it's not by chance that Arthur is led by Giovanni, who's very young, and I'm quite jealous of him because when he was elected, we were all surprised. But I believe we should get used to have young people, to have young leaders. So we should get used to, let's say, a more mix of ages. And so it's not true that responsibilities can be granted only after a very long career. So this should be given also to the young. So thank you for reminding us of this because it's very important. So thank you to Bonaccini, thank you to Anceschi, thank you to Mr. Paleari, thank you to all the speakers. So this is just the first session of the 5 that will be held between today and tomorrow. We will meet again at 1 this afternoon with me still moderating the meeting. So thank you very much for this virtual roundtable. We have about 500 attendees, international attendees, following our sessions. So just to, so they are following us from more than 50 countries. So thank you very much for having been with us, and look forward to seeing you for the next sessions. Thank you to all. Bye bye.